we don't have enough space on our existing site to grow enough food to meet the incredibly high demand, but also any type of what we might consider an urban farm or a demonstration garden or community garden would require significant and ongoing subsidization. So I'm a huge Dragon's Den fan. I've watched that show since the very beginning. So when the Growcer came on, everything just clicked for me. I thought, wow, this is incredibly space efficient, energy efficient. It can grow all year round, regardless of weather conditions. And it can create jobs and supply food for the community. So.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the session on indoor farming. I'm really looking forward to this. This is something really interesting for me, and I think for a lot of our communities, regardless of the size of them. I think there's some real value here, and I'm really looking forward to the stories that are going to be told. And I also want to thank you very much for the sponsorship for the conference this year. It's invaluable to us, and we certainly appreciate your support for that. So you know what, I'm just gonna, because we are running already a few minutes late here, so let's just dive right into it. I'm gonna put it over right away to Branavan, and you are head of sales with the Growcer. So I'm just gonna hand it right over to you and let you go.
Perfect, thank you, Colleen. Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Branavan Tharmaraja. I work with the Growcer, and I'll be the moderator for today's discussion. Today we're excited to be speaking with Kevin Brown, Carla Lockwood, Kevin Ainsworth, and Blair Moreau, each of which are involved with a Growcer project growing in their respective communities across BC. So Kevin Brown is the Climate Action Coordinator for Old Massett Village Council, and their community is currently in the process of getting a Growcer project underway. Kevin Ainsworth is also supporting Old Massett Village Council with their project, and we've been working closely as well. Carla Lockwood is a teacher at KLO Middle School in Kelowna and runs their Growcer farm with the help of her students. Blair Moreau is the Chief Executive Officer at the Gitmaxmak'ay Nisga'a Society in Prince Rupert. They had their first Growcer harvest at the end of 2020, and we're excited to see how their project is continuing to grow. So as we jump into the conversation here, each of the projects across BC are different. So I'm excited to be able to talk with everyone here and listen to their experience firsthand. During the session, I will be asking our speakers about their experiences, starting the projects, the farm impacts in their communities and schools, and their future plans. Overall, we're here to help you discover how you can also take these next steps in food sovereignty with indoor farming. Before we get started, if you have a question throughout the webinar, feel free to type your question into the questions tab on the side of your screen. For the first half of the webinar, I have a short presentation and some questions prepared, and then we'll have an additional 15-minute Q&A period at the end as well. Again, today's webinar will be recorded and sent out this week to everyone who's registered. So without further delay, let's get started. So if we jump into a bit about what we do at the Growcer, so we're a social enterprise based out of Ottawa, Canada. We initially started to work with a lot of the communities in remote parts of Canada, like Nunavik, Northwest Territories, and Nunavut, and we help those communities grow year-round to support and reduce their instances of food insecurity. While working with those communities, what we decided to see was a lot of interest from non-remote communities that are road accessible, are pretty close to urban centers as well. Super interested in starting these initiatives where they're allowed to grow year-round, where they have limited experience in agriculture and they want to start their own food projects. And that's where we started to really focus on, and our goal as an organization is to empower communities to take control of their local food system and sustainably grow fresh, nutritious produce year-round. With a proven ag tech solution. So when I say an ag tech solution, it's pretty much a modular farm, looks like a shipping container, and inside you're able to grow produce year round. And again, so the only requirements is that you have a small site that's prepared, the module gets shipped to the community, gets dropped off, you have a local electrician hook it up to power, you put some water in it, and you're ready to grow. And again, a lot of the communities we work with have no experience in agriculture, but we're here to sort of provide the training that's required on site to ensure that the project is successful. So again, as we jump into more of the projects, we have a few folks here that are able to share more, but again, I want to share that a lot of the communities that we're working with, it's a growing network of farmers, and we're able to leverage each project for their learning. Some communities are doing cultural crops. We're able to leverage their resources to share with other communities. Some schools are starting their own curriculum around this, so we're able to share that information within our network as well. And again, a lot of communities are also focused on the economic development side. So if there's opportunities where communities can look at selling to a grocery store, starting their own community food box, working with colleges and high schools and even universities, we're able to help with those conversations as well. So again, we do have a handful of projects across the country, and today we'll focus our efforts to get to know some of the projects in BC specifically. So I'll do a quick rundown of a few of the projects that we've worked on in BC, and then we'll jump into questions for the panel and some of their learnings moving forward. So right before COVID, we had the opportunity to work with Squamish Nation. They're pretty close in terms of being around an urban center. So they currently have a community food box, which they're growing seasonally. And their goal with that project was be able to work with the Family Services Department and to be able to grow year-round, grow some cultural crops and incorporate that into their existing food box. And this was something that they figured out would be very sort of positively perceived by the community by doing some bit of community engagement. They felt like growing some of these cultural crops and getting youth involved in the program would promote that. And since they explored some of their initial projects in the food space, and they had a community kitchen and an existing food box, they wanted to sort of have an additional program around growing year-round. So due to COVID, we're facing some delays with actually going to the community to set this up. But once we have those travel bans lifted and everyone's doing safe and healthy, we'll be able to sort of implement that project. And we recently also had the opportunity to work with Belmont Learning Center. So again, they're a nonprofit that focuses more on the educational sides of programs. As many of us know, a lot of the nonprofits across the country rely a lot on different funding opportunities and grants to support their existing programs and initiatives. So for them, launching this food box and sort of having that fresh quality produce directly available to community members and generating some proceeds would allow them to be self-sufficient in the years to come, and as well get some revenue to sort of help with their existing programs that their community members are relying on. Kevin A and Kevin B we'll jump into more details about their project. So we've been working over the last probably over a year to sort of plan a project like this with both Kevin A and B for Old Massett Village Council. So the model that we were looking at, very similar to what Blair had planned as well, is to look at doing a community food box as well as potentially selling to local businesses. But again, the primary sort of goal is to ensure that there's fresh quality produce available year-round, and either looking at hiring a full-time employee or 2 part-time employees locally that are interested in agriculture, or youth in the community that sort of want to explore careers in the ag tech space. So having those folks trained and managing the system will be the ultimate goal as well. So if we jump into the project that I had the opportunity to work with with Blair, again, when we were initially planning out the project, our goal was to have community members that are looking to do sign up for like a weekly food box program, and again to ensure that we're able to break even and cover most of our costs, and ensure that we're able to donate some of the produce to community members as well. Again, and we'll have quite a few questions that Blair's has in mind and he wants to share with folks on the webinar as well. And this is a bit more about the project with KLO Middle School. The KLO Middle School Container Farm is the second project of its kind from President Choice Children's Charity. managed for students by students. The charity's goal is to improve access to fresh produce while providing educational leadership opportunities. KLO Middle School was selected because of their focus on place-based education and their commitment to developing a grade 9 credit course that can be shared with future farm recipients. And I'm glad that Carla's on the panel as well, and she'll be able to share her experience working in the farm and helping students with the program as well. So as we go throughout the projects, and we chat more with the folks on the call today, the key sort of message around each of the projects is that every project has its different goals, be it socially or economically, but the ultimate goal is to ensure that the project is self-sufficient and sort of hits all of its mandates in the years to come. So I know Kevin and Blair are going to share more about this, but for us, the planning stages were very important. So who are we engaging with in the community? How are we going to fund this project? Who's going to take care of it? So all the sort of steps that are along the way, where our team here at the Growcer is here to help. So we do start from the initial planning phase to the actual funding aspect. If there's any business plans or funding applications that need to be sort of submitted, we're here to support with that. And then when it comes down to the actual implementation, the Growcer team does have a background specialist in agriculture to support. So we'll have our technicians show up to the community, provide training, and the module itself can be remotely monitored as well. So our team will have access to the farm and will be able to provide recommendations to improve the efficiency of the system as well. So without further delays, we could jump in to a few questions for the folks today. I will let Kevin A and Kevin B sort of jump in with a little intro, and then Blair, and then we could go with Carla. And then once we're done with the intros, we could jump into a few questions.
Thank you, Branovan. Kevin Brown from Old Massett, Haida on the north end. I want to thank Branovan and his team for assisting us on every step of the way. I found out about Growcer through Indigenous Clean Energy out of Ottawa, a national energy, First Nation energy nonprofit that directed me to Growcer, and then I contacted Branovan and was very interested in where it was working, primarily because of food insecurity. And then COVID is just exacerbating that. Kevin A?
Hi, I'm a business consultant from Vancouver, and I had worked up on Haida Gwaii as the CEO of HYCO, the Economic Development Corporation for the Haida Nation, a few years back. And so back doing some consulting for Old Massett, which is kind of fun to see my Haida friends again, and working on some forestry and other economic development initiatives. And this Growcer project is one of the neat other projects that we're looking at up in Old Massett. Really nice fit for this remote community. Thank you.
I'm Carla Lockwood. I am a grade 9 science teacher at KLO Middle School, as you heard, French immersion. And the Growcer was part of PC Children's Charity, and we were fortunate enough to get a grant through that. And I just pretty much forced my way in because I love to grow things. And since getting involved with the project, have learned a lot about food security and food sovereignty. So it's very inspiring.
Hi everyone, my name is Blair Miro. I'm the CEO of the Gitmaxmak'ay Nisga'a Society in Prince Rupert, BC. I actually encountered the Growcer on Dragon's Den of all places when I was first introduced to them, which is why I ended up calling Branovan and his team to get involved. What attracted us to them in the first place and how I ended up here was they had designed their system and marketed it as the solution for extreme environments, namely the Arctic and desert environments, -50 to +50 degrees. And Prince Rupert fits neither of those bills. We're the rainiest and cloudiest city in Canada, and it's incredibly difficult to do traditional agriculture. There's no agriculturally zoned land within 150 kilometers. So I saw a really unique niche and a potential partnership here, and I'm just so excited that it's beginning to pay dividends. And so I'm looking forward to answering people's questions and chatting a little bit more.
Perfect. Thank you everyone for your introductions there. If anyone has any questions, don't hesitate to drop it in the chat on the side of your the conversation here and in the video. We do have a couple of questions prepared, and we'll jump into some of these questions as well. So I know a lot of folks are curious around why the school or the nonprofit or the community would want to start a food project. So Kevin Brown and Kevin A, do you want to start with this? What are some of your reasons for starting a food project?
For me, I worked for our local governments for the last 35 years, and I've watched the decline of the economy in fisheries and forestry. And so our unemployment kept going up, going up, going up. And then, so our unemployment rate is like 60, 70% in old Massett, with a population of about 700, and the majority is youth of the population is youth, and food insecurity has been around here for a long time. And since COVID and transportation costs, because we're so remote, it's really difficult to afford good food. Cheap food and processed food and pop are cheap, and are a health risk, diabetes and that sort of thing. So I want to change the tide of the way we've been living and get back to a more healthier way of life. Thank you.
Sure. The other part that the good fit that struck me is just based on geography. So Haida Gwaii is an archipelago of islands off just west of Prince Rupert, west of the mid coast as well, the most western part of North America, I believe. And so everything obviously needs to come in by barge or BC ferry. And so we talk about food security. It is very, very nice to be able to go grow good, nutritious food at home. For example, there is a Mennonite community on island that does grow fresh vegetables, potatoes, and vegetables seasonally, and there's tremendous demand for that. But if you think about the fact that everything at the grocery store needs to come in by BC ferry, it's not the freshest, it's relatively expensive, and not always available. So this is a very nice fit.
And then Blair, if we were to ask you the same question, you sort of heard of us on Dragon's Den. What were your sort of reasons for looking at this or getting started? How did the idea sort of develop into actually getting this off the ground?
For us, it started, I would say, as early as 2013, where our nonprofit purchased a pretty worn down old garden center. It had 3 greenhouses on it, which are about 100 feet long by 20 feet wide. And we knew there was some potential for growing food and just anecdotal evidence that food insecurity was a problem. But we weren't just quite sure how feasible or what a food project could look like in Prince Rupert. So ultimately, what changed our whole focus and pivot was a quality of life survey was completed by our parent government that showed of the 1,700 Nisga'a citizens that live in Prince Rupert, 1 in 3 households were not regularly eating 3 meals a day. And the #1 barrier to eating 3 meals a day was the high cost of food. So, and to Kevin Brown's point as well, it is way cheaper to buy chips and pop, just in terms of dollars and cents. So healthy food is sometimes it's not an option for some people. So the way we responded was we got involved with an organization called EcoTrust Canada, which helped us bring in master's level students to do some pilot projects over the course of summer of 2019 and 2020. The conclusion that we reached in those experiments was that we don't have enough space on our existing site to grow enough food to meet the incredibly high demand, but also any type of what we might consider an urban farm or demonstration garden or community garden would require significant and ongoing subsidization. So I'm a huge Dragon's Den fan. I've watched that show since the very beginning. So when the Growcer came on, everything just clicked for me. I thought, wow, this is incredibly space efficient, energy efficient. It can grow all year round, regardless of weather conditions. And it can create jobs and supply food for the community. So all of those factors kind of create this constellation that just, and the timing worked out great. So once you and I connected, didn't really ever look back.
That's a sort of great way to segment into the next question as well. I know Carla has the opportunity to work in the farm and sort of has students support the initiative as well. So Carla, how did you get involved with the project? Can you sort of walk us through the early days of when you first heard that your school was getting a Growcer project for the community?
Yeah, so it was in 2018, our principal was standing on the side of a soccer pitch watching his son play soccer, and the local independent grocer owner, Peter Boyd, and him started chatting, and Peter mentioned to Ashley that PC Children's Charity has a grant opportunity for a modular farm. And our school has long been rooted in sustainability. We have a beautiful creek that runs through our property, and up until about 2009, 2010, it was actually just a swale, like a culvert swale type thing. And through the work of a now retired teacher and community members and students, it was all reestablished. And so we just have this culture of caring for the land and sustainability, and we just felt that a modular farm on the property would be amazing. It's also really conducive to education because we run September through June, and then that intense growing season, July and August, there's no students and no teachers on the property. So having something that we can teach agriculture, teach food security through the winter months was an amazing opportunity. Just checking my notes here, my involvement wasn't until March of 2019 when Ash came to me with the grant application and was asking me how grade 9 science curriculum fits into having a modular farm on the property. And I said, like in BC, the grade 9 ecology unit is all about nutrient cycles. I said it fits perfectly into that, but throw the content out and bring the curricular competencies in. It's all scientific method is grade 9 science competencies, and then it hits on pretty much every competency in every subject level or area. So social studies and social justice around food security and sovereignty, math and technology and programming the systems, journalism in our English classes, like it would be so inclusive. So as soon as he told me that this might be an opportunity, I kept just pestering him to make sure that I was involved if it did happen. And then there was a moment that it leaked to the media somehow. He had had a few board meetings, and it leaked to the media somehow that there was a potential that we would be getting this modular farm, and it was printed in the newspaper. And I took a picture of the article in the newspaper and texted him. I said, so this is happening. He's like, oh, that's not supposed to be out there yet. So basically, I was just so excited about it that I made sure that I was a part of the project.
And to jump into that, Carla, how has your experience been like as an operator? So a lot of folks are concerned about the day-to-day on maintaining and operating the system. How has that been?
I was fortunate enough to get a block of time in our timetable this year. And with COVID, we had to switch our timetable. Typically we run linear, but we did it in semesters this year. So that block of time alternated with my prep every semester, which was really good. So I have about an hour and 15 minutes every other day. However, it isn't enough at this point. I'm working probably 2 to 3 times that amount of time in the farm. On harvest days, it's like half to a whole day. And my principal's been just really amazing at making sure that there's coverage for my classes or an on-call teacher for half a day so that I can dedicate the time out in the farm to harvest and transplant and all the tasks and things that it demands.
Awesome. And then Blair, what has the impact of the project been so far in the community? Seeing it in a school, how does that differ in the community? What sort of feedback are you getting directly from the community on the project?
I would say overwhelmingly positive, emphasis on overwhelming. We're still really quite new. I mean, we only did our first test harvest really around New Year's. And our whole model was going to be that we were going to launch a subscription box for the community at large, and they were going to be paying for it. And we'd be making a profit and then using those profits to subsidize, if not below market cost, then free distribution to some of our members who are in need. And so when we put out, I mean, everyone seems to be zoomed out after a year of pandemic-related restrictions. So we didn't think we'd get more than 10 or 15 people in our Zoom consultations. But within 1 hour and a half presentation, we had 110 people on our interest list wanting a subscription box, willing to put a deposit down. So we feel like we've kind of touched a nerve of sorts. There's a demand for local food and prince that's really never been met because of what I had said earlier is, you know, there's no real agricultural land around here. The rainy conditions and the really short growing season means it's difficult, if not impossible, to do anything on a commercial scale. So overall, I'd say the feedback's been incredibly positive. So basically from our test harvest to now, we've been distributing everything for free to our Nisga'a elders, basically for feedback. We want them to tell us, how's the overall quality? How does it taste? Is it fresh enough for you? What's your desired varieties? Even the type of packaging and the logo that we've been developing. So we've had some hiccups and some delays in the commissioning process in the fall, but ultimately the bright side of that was now everyone's first taste test is happening in January and December, which is the hardest time of year to get fresh food anyways. So yeah, it's been overwhelmingly positive. We're incredibly happy to see the feedback and the amount of community support we've had.
Awesome. And then to Kevin A and Kevin B here, I know we've chatted a lot about coming up with the model that makes the most sense for the community. What were sort of the key factors around figuring out the details of the project coming together? And how did you guys sort of put that together?
Looking at what we kind of need, what is missing in terms of fresh food and the cost of getting it here, and then based on some sort of recommendations from yourself on working with other communities, we looked at herbs that are readily available that wouldn't be in the stores because they come in tiny packets and become quite expensive by the time they reach here. Was definitely one thing to look at for sure. And then in the keeping with Blair, it's 60% social, 40% profit, which kind of doing what Blair was talking about, offset for make sure there's those in need and we still stay afloat in growing food. Thank you.
You may be on mute, Kevin.
Thank you. Yeah, for me as a business analyst, the sort of aha moment was just going through the financial model with Branavan and seeing that the business model itself is quite robust. And so even with relatively low selling prices and pretty conservative costs for things like energy, the model still will stay in the black. And as Kevin said, one of our key assumptions was sort of 60-40 social and business. And it is a sustainable business financially, which is quite important as well.
point there. We do have a few questions from the audience here, so I'll toss this question out there. How is the project funded? Very great. A lot of folks are asking that, so I'll jump into that one.
I'm happy to lead off if you'd like. Ours was, we were quite fortunate in having the right partners. So a big piece for us was Northern Development Initiative Trust. So for folks that might be in the Lower Mainland or on Vancouver Island, I know every region has its own separate economic trust. Northern Development Initiative Trust was our largest funding partner. They put up about 70% of the cost of the unit. But frankly, the project for us wouldn't have been possible, not only with that grant, but also with the Growcer working with us to basically retrofit one of their used units that they were using to experiment with hydroponic berry growing. So that saved us a little bit in buying a used retrofit unit, plus Northern Development Initiative Trust grant. Plus then we also had partnerships with EcoTrust Canada, again, on bringing in those master students for pilot projects. And then we also brought in wage subsidy programs as well, so that we could get the first 3 months of our staff trained. All of those things in total, the society ended up with a bill basically for the cost of site preparation, which for us was leveling the rear end of our parking lot in the garden center, upgrading our electrical capacity, running data conduit out there, and then installing water as well. So for the cost of site preparation, we essentially delivered a $250,000 project, all told, with various grant funders on board. So partnerships are absolutely key to make a project like this happen.
I'll jump in. So I mentioned President's Choice Children's Charity. The grant covered the unit, and then a generosity from our parent advisory committee had our site prepared for us. So PAC paid for the site, and PC Children's Charity paid for the unit. Also, PC Children's Charity is supporting us for 3 years too, with all consumables. So their mandate is feeding minds and bodies. So we are right now giving away the produce.
And for us here in Old Massett, my position as climate action coordinator is covered for 3 years. So I can kind of champion this project without any additional cost to me. And the band is also supporting it with the district heating system and the land behind our band office. So they're very supportive in this initiative. And at the same time, we are jointly seeking grants as well. Kevin B.
We could segue perfectly into the next question as well from the audience here. Who does the labor or taking care of the plants, and is that an ongoing paid position?
Oh yeah. For us, we're building it into the business plan, the revenue to cover off the cost for that one.
We're doing the same thing as well, and that one paid position is not only for the actual growing, but also the distribution is how we're building that in as well. And all I would say, if I was to try to give any advice, we completely lucked out with who we were able to hire. A woman with her Bachelor's of Applied Science and Horticulture, years of experience in greenhouse growing, crop scheduling, pest management, all of that stuff. Without her, the project would not be as successful as it has been in the first few months. So staffing is absolutely key if you're trying to build this as a business.
For us, it's me managing the farm, excuse me, mainly because of COVID right now, and we have such tight restrictions on students and movement of students in our school that it's mostly me doing it. However, I have started what we're calling a seed to feed program, where we get classes to sponsor the 6-week growth of that. And so those classes, with their involvement, I can take a couple of kids out with me to do transplant, and then I can take a couple of different kids out on a harvest day, and they help me with those larger days tasks. But the day-to-day maintenance and chores in the farm is me doing it. And I'm being paid by the district. I have a block of time to do that.
We got a parent from the Parent Advisory Council giving you a big shout out there, Carla, for your work. So that's great.
Yes, hi, Myrna.
And then jumping into the next question from the audience here, how big is a unit and how much can it produce? Is one of the questions. I could take this one. So the farm itself is around 40 foot, so it looks like a sea can. It's modular and it grows around 500 heads of produce every week. It could be different varieties. So I work with communities that are growing spinach, a bit of herbs, and some cultural crops. You could grow many more varieties. So we stick with things that grow pretty fast. So from seed to full plant under 6 weeks. And then we have some communities that are also doing like cultural crops like Mount sorrel, lilies, and different kind of varieties as well. But we could grow as many different varieties based off of what the community wants. So if you're looking to do a food box and folks in the community want spinach, for example, so we could focus on spinach. If you want like Asian greens like bok choy, we could definitely grow that as well. So Blair, from your initial community engagements, what were the few varieties that folks wanted in the community?
No surprise, butter crunch and romaine lettuce was top of the list. Same with spinach as well, was right up there. Microgreens was a surprise. I didn't think it would be as popular as it was. And then in terms of herbs, basil, far and away #1, followed closely by cilantro, and then everything else didn't even get the majority of respondents interested. So we're kind of laser focused on basically 6 to 8 varieties is our sweet spot.
Perfect. And then Carla, what has been the impact on the school so far, and what has been the feedback from students and teachers and parents on the project?
It's been tremendous in a word. It's really, where do I even begin? It's really been amazing because, so I was part of a BCTF think tank about food security and food sovereignty, and a lot of food programs right now are targeted to students in need and families in need, which is great, but it does come with a little bit of a stigma around that. And so by having the modular farm and having this food accessible to everyone, it's reducing that stigma in our school. The impact is tremendous. Like the kids love working in the farm. It's something new with COVID and all, like I said, with all of the restrictions that are on place, having this new thing on site is amazing and motivating and inspiring. And for example, right now I have 3 design thinking classes working on different challenges. So one of the challenges we have is because we're not running at full capacity, there's no way I could manage over 500 leafy greens in a week. We're doing about 125 leafy greens in a week. And so what I have is trays that are open to the light, and we are getting algae growing in there. And so what we did is I took my issue 2 classes, and they are coming up with all sorts of amazing ideas that involve our 3D printers in our library and creating little like plugs and stuff to plug the holes so the light can't shine down. Another thing that we encountered is with the snow and the way our farm is set up, there's no real like space where we can get our shoe covers on, or in my case, get my shoes off and my farm boots on to go in and out to keep pests and things down. So we have another tech class and a woodwork class working collaboratively together to come up with some sort of like pergola or shed or airlock or something that could go on the front and kind of give us some space and workspace around the farm. So it's just, it's touching everyone, and everyone is just so excited about it. Did I answer? Okay. Did I answer the question? You guys can't tell, I'm like super nervous.
You're doing a great job. And then if we jump into more of the educational opportunities with projects like this, how have you sort of incorporated that in your classroom?
Okay, so I talked about seed to feed. My class in particular, we've been looking at other ways. Like I've polled our staff and said, like, where does this fit into your curriculum and your content? As I said, grade 9 curriculum, it fits amazing. So we talk about nutrient cycling and human impacts on the environment with excessive nutrients or phosphorus, nitrogen, carbon cycles, those kinds of things. And so talking about them in a closed system, like a modular farm, pros and cons of that, like it really works well with science. But then I talked to teachers and students alike as to where it could fit in other areas. And one of the most inspiring ones I thought was like journalism in your English classes. PC Children's Charity chose our site because of access. So having people visit the farm and see the farm and really promote this kind of agricultural system. And they said, well, we could, send reporters to your site. And I said, let's do one better and have kids write pieces to submit to local social media or newspapers or whatever. So it's just, it's amazing.
Awesome. And then we'll jump over to some more questions for Kevin and Blair here as well. So Kevin A. or B, I know we're in the planning stages of the project. What kind of challenges are you facing and how are we sort of overcoming those? Because I think a lot of folks in the audience are looking to start projects like this and they're probably facing similar barriers or challenges. What are your sort of advice around overcoming certain challenges that they're facing?
For me, it was like Carla, one-man gang kind of thing, trying to look at the project and get it off the ground. But there was a lot of community support and instilled culture currently in the past, say, 10 years, as the Adult Day program has a garden, a greenhouse, and the high school has a hydroponics and a greenhouse. So there's already a culture instilled. So where the elders would be doing the seedlings, kindergarten kids would come in and do some planting as well. So it was instilled in food programs, like lunch programs in the schools. Like, for example, now we're doing processing fish and venison. So there's a huge culture that I'm just trying to sort of take to kind of the next level here and address sort of the bigger problems of food insecurity. Yeah, money, funding is the biggest one because the technical expertise is here and the demand. So money for sure.
Yeah, and certainly the Growcer team and Branavan have been really, really supportive, helping us with some grant opportunities. So our first attempt, Branavan did a lot of heavy lifting, getting everything out the door on time. And we're going to look at a few other opportunities this week, including NDIT. So thanks for the good tip on that one, Blair.
Blair, do you want to share some of the sort of challenges that you were facing in your planning stages in the early days?
Our challenges today look very different than the challenges we were facing when we first got the project. So, I mean, the easiest way to answer that question is we definitely underestimated both the actual physical costs of site preparation. That was just, we didn't really fully anticipate exactly the scope and scale of work. So I'd say at a minimum, if you don't have the electrical capacity to host the grocer unit, you need to be budgeting $25,000 roughly to get yourself up to spec. Once we got through all of that, though, then just like Kevin A and B have said, it's like the learning curve, the technical expertise is there, the demand is there. Then it's really all about just getting enough cash to get the project done. So once we overcame that hump by finding the right project partners, whether that was NDIT and the actual cash towards the purchase of the unit or EcoTrust and helping us bring in the master's interns, I mean, we couldn't have done it on our own is the best way to say that. But our biggest challenge today and it's a good problem to have, is just this overwhelming, insatiable demand that we cannot service out of one grocer unit. So really, our longer term goal for the project is it might not necessarily look like a second grocer unit, but how can we use that as a foundation to basically become the local food hub in Prince Rupert. Our biggest challenge now is we have a board of directors who have become so inspired and forward-looking and progressive that they're saying, why do we just have to stop in Prince Rupert? Why can we not become, the major regional food player in the entire Northwest BC? So that's our biggest challenge. How do we scale what we've already started and unleash that on the rest of the region?
Perfect. I was going to transition into the next question there for Blair, and he pretty much answered that as well. Like more of your long-term goals there. So sort of setting up the project and setting up a local food hub, and then exploring that opportunity to be more of a regional hub as well. And then I can
add a bit more to that if you want.
Yeah,
just in terms
go for it. Yeah.
Sorry, because you didn't ask me that question. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. For us, we see using the Growcer model. If you're approaching it as a business, as a self-contained business, one unit doesn't necessarily justify a full-time bookkeeper or investing in an online point of sale system, for example. But we do have kind of a portfolio of social enterprises, so we're able to integrate the Growcer unit into our existing garden center. So we can reasonably see a future where we can start to supplement the fresh green subscription box. So it's not just bok choy, lettuce, and spinach. We can start to add on some of nature's bounty from around our area, like salmon and halibut, other types of seafoods. And then really, again, going back to the idea of trying to become a regional food player, why can we not be the connective tissue for all these regional food producers and then try to scale our subscription box to get as much local food into as many local hands as possible? So we really see the Grocers unit being the foundation upon which we can build that infrastructure.
We'll jump into the sort of the future and the long-term goals here as well. Carla, so what are your future plans for the project as well?
Yeah, so they change with inspiration and motivation. Originally, we were talking about, in order to keep it sustainable financially, is selling the produce to Peter at Independent. And that's absolutely possible, but I sent some food bins home to our PAC members, and there was a suggestion for a subscription box that way too. And so we've been talking about subscription box that's like a pay what you can type model. So it's accessible to everyone, or sponsor a bin. So kind of a buy one, get one model, so that really it can go into hands of all families in our school. And then long term for sure is to generate revenue in order to put money back into food services at our school site, with the goal of basically having no member of our community having to pack a lunch. There will always be fresh, nutritious food on site and available to everyone every day. So, and I should say too, like our produce, we are giving it to students in those classes that are sponsoring, but it's also being used quite a lot in our foods classes, which is really nice also.
So we got a few minutes left here. So we do have a final questions, but if anyone in the audience has any questions, don't hesitate to type it into the questions tab on your screen. So I just got one here. Could solar be used as a power source? Yes, it can. We're able to sort of figure out what kind of solar panels, where the project will be located. We're able to run the numbers and figure out if that's feasible for sure. So we do have different communities that are doing different things around power sources. So some communities in the north, we know they're diesel generated, so they're using different alternative sources to heat the unit as well. So we could definitely explore that option as well. So another question here for Kevin A and Kevin B. What's one piece of advice you would give other sort of communities or organizations that are looking to start this project? How did you start in the early sort of planning phases of this project?
Well, I think for me it was the ambition to get a project or something similar like this, but in working for a government, we have zero-based budgeting. So my forte is not profit and loss. So I had to reach out and get that expertise, both on that as well as the growing food, because basically a meat and potatoes man. So I was quite surprised when you sent me a list of 66 things, and I thought it was a variety of vegetables, and it was a variety of lettuces. There was that many types of lettuces. I had no clue. Not at all. Thank you.
Well, I mean, from my perspective, it was quite easy, frankly. I mean, there are Growcer webinars. Branovan and his team have some really good PowerPoint presentations available, and seemingly really, really generous with their time to educate you about the system, answer all of your questions, and help you with all of the due diligence required to get some funding applications in and that kind of thing. It's been a pleasure to work with.
Thank you, Kevin. And then I'll pass this question over to Blair, because I know Blair mentioned a few things about funding and partnerships. I know with EcoTrust as well. So what kind of support did you require? I know Kevin's mentioned this as well. Outside of your organization, I know you mentioned partnerships. What was sort of the most important kind of support that you felt that helped in the initial planning phases as well as in the implementation side of the project?
Well, I'd first echo absolutely everything that Kevin A and B said. That, I mean, every bit of service that the Growcer was able to provide for us, we needed. Otherwise, we would not be where we are today. One really specific example of one of those success factors or supports that we really needed was, I think you just called it your return on investment, your ROI Excel spreadsheet, which basically walks through just an incredible amount of detail, all the different types of projections you can do on the number of racks that you're going to grow, the types of varieties, the price point you're going to sell it at, your energy costs, your labor costs, everything. You can run a seemingly unlimited, infinite amount of projections. That helped us build a really strong business case. And so that's ultimately what I think is responsible for getting us funded by Northern Development to such a high degree. So yeah, strong business case, that was absolutely key. We needed to have the right staff in place. Without having those master's level students being able to come with an academic background in food security, they really wanted to prove themselves from a practical standpoint. I mean, they had done so much academic research and published so many papers, but they wanted to do something practical and hands-on. So they were able to bridge those two worlds for us, which was incredibly important. And then I know I mentioned it earlier, but I have to give her another shout out. The woman we have running our unit, her name is Crystal. It's not just her education and her experience, but her attitude as well. I mean, it takes a little bit of luck to make a project like this happen, but you need someone who can roll with the punches, who can respond to uncertainty, who can deal with completely unforeseen issues, big and small. So the Growcer has been walking hand in hand with us through a lot of those small and large problems as we've encountered them, and that's the only reason that we haven't fallen flat on our face in March.
We do have a question here about the price of produce and the heads grown per week. So just to jump into that, like Blair mentioned, we do have like a projections that we use. So you do have all the numbers right here, but it's around 500 heads of produce every week, not every 6 weeks. The grow cycle is every 6 weeks, but we'll split up the growing environment into different racks. So you have rack A, B, and C, but each area you'll be able to harvest that every week. So you're getting around 500 heads of produce every week throughout the year. Just to clarify that number up for you. And then I'll give Kevin some time here to sort of share his story in the process of getting this project off the ground.
So kind of the background history of we live on the coast. We're primarily fishermen and forestry, but in my research, I found Haida potatoes were here before pre-contact, like when the fur traders came here in Alaska in 1700s, 1800s. And we had trade centers with the potatoes and trading dried fish. So we were trading with the fur traders and each other. the story goes that a man paddled down to Peru and swiped some potato seeds and tobacco seeds. So pre-contact, we were growing tobacco and hydro potatoes, which the hydro potatoes still exist today, but not the tobacco. And then we were trading with early homesteaders on Haida in the early 1900s, and everybody had gardens before the BC ferries and centralization came in. So we have to, and that's how our food gets here now. So we need to go to the decentralization of food and grow local, shop local. Thank you.
And Carla, just the final question here. I know you've had the opportunity to sort of work in this system, work with students as well as parents and community members. What has been the biggest learning curve for you around the growing, or is it more the distribution side? Just to hear your thoughts there.
The distribution side for sure, and actually like post-harvest, we're struggling to find fridge space in our school. That was something we didn't see coming. So we've been a little innovative. We bought like smaller totes that fit into more domestic size fridges, and are looking into purchasing a larger fridge for this. But that was the biggest one, I think, that we went through. I'm lucky enough that my high school job was in a greenhouse, so I understand the nutrients in the water systems and that kind of stuff. And then my husband owns a home automation company, so I know about programming and modules and that kind of stuff. So I had some prior knowledge going into the farm. So yeah, it was more like post-harvest for us, and where to put the produce and how to distribute it in particular, because COVID has put quite a bit of restrictions on that. But I'm sure once we're out of this, it'll be good. And again, like there's all sorts of learning opportunities there, getting a class set up for supply chain management, and like all of that can be now taught in schools, not just like the growing and the agriculture, but the business model itself.
Awesome. So thank you everyone for joining us today and for all your questions, and a special thank you to our speakers for taking the time out of their busy schedule. To learn more about the Growcer or about our projects, you can definitely visit our website, thegrowcer.ca, or follow us on social media. If we didn't get to any of your questions today, don't feel to contact me directly. Thank you, and have a great rest of your week, everyone. Be safe.